by Hudson.
Hey, paisans, the time has come. On the air since 2009, the independently produced, non-FCC compliant champ of video game talk podcasting. Here comes Tiger Claw Radio. Here's your host, Critical Failure.
What's going on, everybody? This is Critical Failure. You're listening to Tiger Claw Radio. You know, once in a while I turn this on and I do the old intro and something happens, the magic just doesn't come right away. And that happened this time. I fired it up and the first thing came out of my mouth was greetings one and all. Greetings one and all. This is Jungle Rat Rob. You're listening to Tiger Claw Radio. Rob, if you're out there, I hope you're doing good, brother. All right. So this MS-DOS is the star of the show this week. I played the original Rogue. I played Pinball Construction Set. And I played Beast. I played some of those obscure MS-DOS games. But we're going to get to that later on. For now, let's kick things off with a chiptune. Now, give me a second here. We're going to dig back into the archives. Because, again, I haven't had a whole lot of time to dig up new albums. But there is plenty of stuff to listen to. Here's a bit of a short one. This is Drags Connor with Cats. You're listening to Tiger Claw Radio. I had two brief stints in the van this week. One was just a wee little van cast, which was 5 minutes and 24 seconds. Just a wee little van cast. And then the second one was the big one where I really dug into the meat of the issues. Got into MS-DOS, started talking about some classic games. Back when Electronic Arts, believe it or not, was like the awesomest company around. But before that, let's take our quick little check-in with a rainy Tuesday morning. Good morning, everybody. It's Monday morning. It's time for the Vancast. It's 44 degrees out, and it's rainy. It is stinking, rotten raining today. Raining cats and dogs. And I am off to work to do my Monday morning at the office. And what a weekend it's been. A lot of screaming, a lot of crying, a lot of he touched me and I'm all my potatoes and all this and then the other. Some days, and only a parent will understand this, but some days can't wait for Monday to get to work and have some peace and quiet. My goodness. Not a whole lot to go over this morning except a quick story. Can't remember if I've told this on the air or not, but if I have, it's been a while. Never loan out your video games as children. How old were you and what happened when you learned this lesson? Because we all learned it at some point. Never loan out your video games. It's always a bad idea. Hey, I went to Timmy's house and he had Mario Brothers 2. Can I borrow it? Timmy, please? Okay. Lots of games got loaned, and then families moved away. That happened one time. This wasn't the story that I intended to tell, but I loaned one kid my copy of Super Mario 64 in place of, I can't remember what it was called, but it was some sort of Outrun type, off-road / outrun type racing game for the Nintendo 64. And it was like, the agreement was we were going to swap for the summer, and then I went back to his house, and he had moved away. So that was a pretty rough deal. But when I was even younger than that, 4 years old, 5 years old, my older brother loaned away a game, Paperboy, for the NES. I can't remember any of the names of the kids, but he loaned away Paperboy in a loan that was not a trade. It was just like, hey man, can I borrow the game? Yeah man, you sure can. Kid had the copy for like 2 weeks, maybe 3, something like that. Reasonable amount of time for a friend. I remember riding in my mother's wood grain station wagon. A station wagon that she ended up selling to a cab company. It ended up being turned into a cab. And the cab driver who drove it lived in the same neighborhood. So we would pass my mother's car painted as if it were a taxi cab. Very weird. But anyway, I remember driving in this old station wagon to go get the game. We go to the kid's house, and he's like, oh, it's at Gary's house. Like, whatever the guy's name is. All right. So we're going to go down to Gary's house, because I loaned it to Gary. So we're walking down to Gary's house. It's like a block away. Gary had the game. And then we were reacquired Paperboy. So we loaned it to a kid. That kid loaned it to another kid. And then we were able to get it back through that chain. Now, I can't remember the names of either kid, but the second kid who sub-acquired the game later in life beat a kid to death with a baseball bat. And this is the kind of human being who was in charge of my Nintendo games. Never loan out your games. Now we go to these digital games, you know. I guess there's still physical games. You got the Switches and all that stuff. Those have cartridges, just like in the old days. Never let your kids loan out games, especially now that they're more delicate than they used to be. And that's my story. All that happened when I was very, very little. I was probably like 4 years old, maybe 5 tops. But this was all my older brother's doing. I would never have loaned out Paperboy. It's weird, when you look back at Paperboy on the NES, I don't think of it as a particularly good game, right? I mean, it's okay. But at that age, being really little, Paperboy, if you remove the element of what's a rare and expensive game, and if you remove the element of what's cool to like, I find that the games that I actually bonded with and thought were amazing were like completely different than what you might think. And as a youngster, I thought Paperboy was like one of the top tier games. I thought it was like the peak of creativity. You're riding a bicycle and there's like an obstacle course, and you throw the papers and like people run out of their house and after you to try and kill you, and there's like lawnmowers going all over the place. I don't know. I thought it was a cool game. I thought Paperboy was super bad, man. And so that's my call to action. What's your story about loaning out a game going wrong? And with that, real quick one this morning, I'm going to send you guys back to the studio. I'll see you there.
We're hanging out. Let's do another one. This is Crab Bandicoot, all one word. This is Ilsa Del Adderdecker. Adderdecker. Ugh. This was submitted to a Battle of the Bits competition back in 2018. April 19th, 2018 to be exact. And it's a great track, but there were a lot of submissions and only a few spots on the final release of the compilation. So I don't know that this one made it or not. But this was one of the few competitions over Battle of the Bits where, while the competition was still hot, I was downloading other tracks. I was downloading some of the stuff people were submitting and building a folder myself. So this is from my personal picks from that particular competition, and it's Crab Bandicoot here on Tiger Claw Radio. It's a little early, but this next Vancast is going to run a bit on the long side. So I want to go ahead and thank the sponsors before it gets too late. And when I say sponsors, I'm talking about the Patreon sponsors, the patrons. Because this is a Patreon-sponsored program. It's the reason I can say whatever I want. I don't have to give you any advertisements for underpants or shaving cream. It's just me, it's just you, and it's these distinguished gentlemen. And to them I offer early access to the show. Occasionally I'm able to put together some Patreon-exclusive content. Most recently it was the Chiptune special. And I also read their names off here in a hall of distinguished gentlemen. And boy, are they ever distinguished gentlemen. And they are Hemrock, Sendu, Tecmo Balls, Darabka, and Konstantin Kelman. Thank you guys very much. Believe me when I tell you, gentlemen, that you guys are the life's blood of TCR, and you're making sure we come back every single week. And without you, there's no show. And with that, we got a lot to cover in this next Vancast, so strap yourselves in and get out your pocket protector. We're going to talk some video games. You're listening to Tiger Claw Radio.
Morning, everybody. It's time for the Vancast. It is Thursday morning. Getting ready to go do my day at work. 42 degrees outside, 6:23, and it is raining. It's raining. It's raining. And here we go. Just getting ready to pull out of my spot here. Backing up into the street, off of the other street. And a hoop and a how and away we go. Alarm went off this morning at 4:50. 10 minutes of 5. Hit that snoozer once. 5 o'clock, rolled out of bed. Wiped the sleep out of my eyes. Slowly dragged myself up to my office. Threw on the kettle. Brushed my teeth. Poured myself a cup of tea. Safeway Select black tea, generic black tea. Sat down on my desk chair right in front of the Panzer and Panzer Studios. 3 monitor sweep to wake me up in the morning, sipping my tea. Not even really doing anything on the computer. The computer had just come from an update last night. Windows pushed through some sort of an update, so I let it handle that in the middle of the night. And so it did that, and then it rebooted. Sat down at the computer, started clicking around. I mentioned the XFL this past week. I made a little video about it. The XFL returned to service for the first time, after 19 years. So I watched some of the Washington D.C. Miami game, and I actually really enjoyed it. I don't know, maybe it was just because it was something different from the NFL or whatever. Because I really don't like the NFL. I think the NFL is like a crazy thing. I don't know. I don't like it. I'm really turned off by it. But this was kind of fun. So I sat down this morning. Unfortunately, it occurred to me that I didn't really have the time to dig into football. But nonetheless, I had considered it. But instead, I opened up DOSBox. Somebody left a comment on an old MS-DOS menu-based program video that I made, a couple of years back. And like the rest of my MS-DOS videos, that one had a slow climb and actually ended up doing okay. So every time somebody comments on one of those videos, it always makes me want to open up a DOSBox. Well, this morning I actually did it. I opened up DOSBox and started snooping around my directories. My implementation is old. These days when I do DOSBox, I usually do it on my laptop. The idea being the laptop can't handle the more sophisticated games. So if I'm going to run, if the laptop's going to be viable, I'll use it for a DOSBox. That works just fine. So this particular implementation I haven't touched in a long time. And it was set up to auto mount, which was nice. Typically when you open DOSBox, you got to mount the C drive, mount space C space C:\DOS, and then C: to switch to the C drive. All that had been done already. I auto mounted to G.
So I didn't have to worry about mounting, but I can still like drag and drop things onto the DOS box icon to make it work. Anyway, long story short, got into MS-DOS, started snooping around, and I came across the pinball construction set, which we've talked about here on the show in the recently. So I said, okay, I used to love pinball construction set. We just last week we were talking about a bunch of discs I had with tables on it that got corrupted, and it occurred to me, I made those tables easy enough back then. Let's just give it a try and see what I can come up with. So I opened it up and started snooping around the tools, trying to reacquaint myself with how pinball construction set worked. You see, it wasn't terribly complicated, but it was a little bit on the cumbersome side. It was designed so that when you would build your table, you were building it with a joystick. You would use your joystick to move the little arrow key around, the cursor around, and then drag and drop things that way. It was also set up so that you could control it with the number pad on a keyboard, right on the right-hand side. So if you're using a laptop, pinball construction set is very difficult to play unless you have a full number pad on the right. So there you go. So I'm building away, and the first thing I did was create a template. And by that I mean I placed the flippers and I placed the alley that shoots the ball, because when you start out, you're given a completely blank slate, and all it has is a border that goes around it. Top wall, right side, left side, that's it. You got to place the flippers. Not only the flippers, but you really got to build the housing around the flippers. Typically in a pinball game, when you shoot the ball, you pull out the plunger, and the ball goes straight up some sort of alley, and a lot of times it'll curve around the top and then dump in. At least in video pinball, that's the way it works. Oftentimes in modern mechanical pinball, once you launch that ball, it'll get caught in a ramp, slide underneath the table, and then pop out somewhere else where you're not expecting, unless you're familiar with the table. But you don't get that. You got to build the ramp yourself. If you just try and launch the ball straight away, there's not even a spring mechanism to catch it. It just falls off the table. So you got to lay in a bunch of those foundation items. And then once I do that, then I would save it as a template. And that's the only time I'd ever do it. So if I wanted to build a new table, I would just load up my template. And there you go. The flippers, the housing, the alleyway, all that stuff is already built already. And that's how I did pinball construction set 20 years ago when I was a wee lad. Or more, geez. So this morning was about getting reacquainted with the tools. I didn't embark on any great creative journey. I did make a little table, and then I put some bumpers down, and I started crafting some barrier objects. You can create custom barriers in that by dragging a shape, like a square shape, onto the table, and then the square shape will have vertices. You can get out the arrow key, move the vertices around, bada boom, bada bing, you got a custom shape. It's pretty, again, with the joystick interface, super cumbersome, but it does work. And then once you get your shape down, there's a pixel by pixel paint tool where you can you can like dump in a color to fill it, and then you use the pixel tool to like touch up the edges and make it look nice. So I was working on this, just laying out a simple table, and then right about the time it was time to wrap things up and head off to work, it crashed. Now, here's the thing about pinball construction set you gotta understand. The way it worked when I was a kid, when we had the actual diskette, put it in the machine, you would navigate to the drive and run it, right? Run the game. It was the executable was a .com file, pcs.com.
not exe. So you could run that file, and the game would open up. And interestingly enough, there was no way to quit the game back to MS-DOS. It was one of those games that was just designed where once you were done playing, you had to reboot the entire machine. Not very uncommon for 80s games, 80s computer games. That was more of an Apple thing, Apple II or whatever. But or I guess you could think of it as a Commodore 64 thing too, right? You would load the game, and then I don't really think there was a way to get back to the basic command prompt in Commodore 64 once the game was loaded. It kind of worked like that. But because of that, I never once, in the history of Pinball Construction Set, I never once had it crash on me. So I found it interesting that happened this morning. Probably nothing to do with Pinball Construction Set, probably more of a DOSBox thing, I don't know. The whole thing was acting very strange. I would press the keys on the keyboard and nothing would happen. Arrow keys would function just fine, but I couldn't type anything. So something happened weird. Once I got out of DOSBox, everything worked fine. But it was great. I had the chance to mess with it enough to really rekindle the creative juices and remind me of something that I loved so much. Because again, Pinball Construction Set, it's super simple. You just drag the pinball elements from one side of the screen onto the other, and there's your machine. But there's nothing like it anywhere. And that always kind of made me wonder why we didn't get something like that for mobile devices. It seems like the whole formula would work very well on mobile, because you have on a smartphone, you've got a nice elongated screen that looks very well with pinball. Matter of fact, I run Zen Pinball on my phone on occasion, right? Good old, I guess if you're a Steam user, you'd know it as Pinball FX2 or Pinball FX3. I run that on my phone because pinball on a nice responsive smartphone is really, it works really well with the elongated screen. But anyway, be that as it may, Pinball Construction Set up and running this morning. And after I closed everything all up, turned the computer off, started getting ready for work, got my lunch together, got my equipment for the office. I was thinking, hey man, so a couple of years back, Hemrock put together some diskettes and loaded them down with shareware, right? And he went to MagFest and he distributed these shareware discs. Wouldn't it be cool to build some MagFest themed pinball tables? It wouldn't be that hard. I would just have to make a pinball table, and then at the top of the scoreboard where you have some open paint area, typically this is the area where people will draw the name of the pinball table. I could just write, hey, this is MagFest Pinball and MagFest 2021 or whatever it may be. Unfortunately, I didn't have this idea until I was already done messing with it for the day and everything was all closed up. But that was an idea I had this morning. Pinball Construction Set is still viable. Yes, you have to drop the cycles down on your DOSBox implementation. So you're going to want to hit Control-Alt-F11 several times. Drop it down to like maybe 500 PC cycles in order to control the speed so that everything runs correctly. But still a great game. So I used to run it on older computers, and one of the problems I would have with it is that it's one of these games that's designed to run as fast as the PC cycles can handle. So if you just load it up raw, everything will run too fast to really see or play or understand. Castle Wolfenstein has this problem too. Now on DOSBox, it's pretty easy to deal with, because DOSBox you can manipulate the PC cycles faster or slower live. Just Control-Alt-F11 to make it slow down and Control-Alt-F12 to speed it up. You just got to be careful, because if you slip and hit Control-Alt-F9, that's kill DOSBox, which you got to be careful not to do that in the middle of the game. But in the old days, there wasn't a whole lot we could do. You'd have to run it as fast as you could. certain computers it worked well with and certain computers it didn't. Eventually, I figured out that you could set the speed settings of your individual tables, and if you slow it down all the way and reduce the gravity all the way, the mechanics became really floaty, but it was slow enough that you could actually play it. So those are particular problems that happened, dealing with old computers. So if I distributed it, so how did we mitigate that issue in any other game? Well, there was an external program you could run called MoSlow. And what MoSlow did was you would launch MoSlow, and then you would launch another program at like half speed or whatever. So the command prompt worked as follows. You couldn't just type MoSlow, like moslow.exe. If you just ran it, it was one of those that was like, hey, you need to run this program with arguments. So you type moslow.exe, space what you wanted to run, so space c:\PCS /games/PCS.com. Then after that, you type a number, and that number was the percentage of the typical PC cycles you'd want to use. So if you had to run your computer at 25% of its normal speed to play the game correctly, you would type in a 25 there. So it was a lengthy thing to type it out and make it work. And typically, if you wanted to use MoSlow, if you wanted to play a game a lot that used MoSlow, most people would make a batch file. So you'd open up a text editor and you'd write out this command, moslow.com space c:/games/PCS/PCS.com space 80 or 25 or whatever. Very lengthy kind of thing. So if I were to distribute a pinball construction set implementation, there's a couple ways I could do it. I could just release the table by itself and leave it up to the average user, because most people if you're able to run a computer that has 3¼ inch floppy disks, then you probably know how to handle PC cycles. Or, since MoSlow was freeware, I could package it with MoSlow and then create a batch file so that you could run the game normally, or you could run it slow. Or, on top of that, we could get really crazy and we could include a menu program to run we could include a menu program that would have a few selections where you could run the game, or you could run the game quickly or slowly. Learned a lot about that doing that MS-DOS menu programs video. That wouldn't be too difficult to do. Most commonly, when discs were distributed, you'd find instructions printed on the label. So you'd have, instead of just PCS or Pinball Construction Set disc, you'd say like, it would be like Magfest Pinball.exe, and then magfestpin.exe and magfestpin2.exe, to signify these are the two games that are on the discs and on this disc, and these are the two commands you run to play them. So I could just add the table, and then add a second batch file to run it slow, and then write the instructions out on a label, put it on the label, and that's how it distributed at Magfest. I don't know. I think there's some fun things that could be done. First of all, distributing a pinball construction set table, specially made for that event, I think is an awesome idea in my opinion, as an MS-DOS fanatic. And then all of the fun things you can do for packaging, right? You could include a specialized README file, which, yeah, true, that's nothing more than a text file, but you can have a lot of fun with that. You could put, I could put shout outs to all the people I know, as well as my own little YouTube channel, Very Little Memoirs. This is for MagFest 2021. I've been going to MagFest since 2013 or 2012. I found out about it through Derek Alexander. It's been great. It's the only real mega video game event I go to all year. Write out a little bit about Bill Budge and his pinball construction set program from the 1980s, what it was and how it was important, and how in the 90s you could get a hold of, in the early 90s you could get a hold of CD-ROMs filled with shareware. It's the Mega Funhouse CD. Get it today. And then most of the games on a CD like that would be shareware, but oftentimes you'd find pinball games made from the pinball construction set. Not the construction set itself, but highly developed tables that came out of it. Playable on your Windows 95 PC. All that stuff, man. So I think there could be a lot of fun to be had. And I'm thinking now, a copy of Moslo, a copy of a pinball construction set table, and a copy of a PC menu program, as long as it wasn't too sophisticated, all of those things together would still be very, very, very space light. Which would be super cool. So that would leave space for, anything else that I could dream up to fill the extra space with. For example, shareware, right? We see this on old CD-ROMs. You buy StarCraft or something like that, and then the company that made the game would include shareware versions of their other games right on that CD. Sierra did this a lot. I don't think Blizzard really did that, but Sierra did that quite a bit. So I'm thinking about what shareware I would include. I don't know, maybe another awesome game to do this with, top to bottom, make a specialized game and distribute it at MagFest. ZZT. You guys know what ZZT is? ZZT was a game construction kit, right, for MS-DOS, and basically you were making a little top-down shooting games with ASCII graphics. The difference between ZZT and Pinball Construction Set is that ZZT allowed you to utilize a programming language to manipulate the objects. So yes, you could build the games with the parts that as they were designed, but there was a little bit more freedom to break out of their mold. It's pretty crazy. And thinking about it now, there were a whole lot of different game creation tools for MS-DOS that could be used for something like this. Text World is another great example. Text World is a text adventure game creation kit. If you guys are old enough to know what a text adventure is, what they now call interactive fiction. There's no graphics, you just write it out. Where are we? What's around me? Look at thing, take thing, use object with other object. That sort of thing. And then you have to draw a real map in order to play it. I really liked those games. I never beat a single text adventure, but I always enjoyed playing them, especially back in the day when I was, one of the only things I had. There's a game creation kit to build simple text adventures. Now, I think most of the text adventures that were really worth their salt were not created in such a tool. Most of those were written in BASIC or something like that, some sort of actual programming language. If I were to create something special, that's one way to do it. It's really all about space. If the goal is to make it fit on a diskette, it has to be very, very small. I think a disk holds roughly 3 megs, a little bit over 3 megs on a high density 3¼ inch floppy disk. So 3 megs doesn't sound like a lot by today's standards, but if you start talking about MS-DOS programs, 3 megs gives you a lot of space. Put it this way: the 5-inch floppy disks, I can't remember how much they held, but it was less than 1 megabyte. It was 700K or something like that, 500K, something like that. A very small amount. And I could probably put 4 pinball construction set tables on one of those disks. So the smaller, more rigid 3¼ inch floppy disks were 3¼ 3.5 inch, 3.5 inch, whatever the size was. Those could hold 7 times the amount that the larger, more floppy disks could hold. So if I went the pinball construction set route, I could spend all year making an army of pinball construction set tables and release it as a MagFest mega pack
I mean, strictly talking about kilobyte for kilobyte space, there's enough space to do that. Release a mega pack, not just a mega pack, but a mega pack that's tricked out with a menu program. You wouldn't even have to do too sophisticated a menu program. You could just say, look, there's a program called Valet, which you run Valet, and it gives you a navigatable file tree. File tree programs were pretty popular. I remember my dad had one, and I think if you got MS-DOS, the later versions of MS-DOS, they came with some sort of file tree program built in. So you could just say, right on the disk, run PCS to play pinball, run menu to see the menu program, run PCS to play pinball, run valet.exe to open the file program or something like that. You could do it pretty easily. Yeah, so that's pretty cool. I think it's fun to think about how many different things you could do with the space of one diskette. Because if you open an MS-DOS implementation today, you're gonna feel like you've got all the space in the world when it comes to MS-DOS programs, and you really do. Even if you're on like a really tiny hard drive, you can do a lot with a little space in MS-DOS. So, yeah, a little diskette. Remember, even back in the day, a diskette was not enough space for some people. If you were to buy Windows, and by that I mean Windows 3.1 or earlier, they came on several disks. Windows 3.1 was like 10 disks or something crazy like that. 10 disks, and it was a time investment to install because each disk would run like 15 minutes or so before it was ready to switch to the next one, something like that. Maybe 15 minutes is a bit long, but a lot of the heftier software suites would do that. My dad used a program called WordPerfect that was that way as well. Bunch of disks to get it installed. So even in those days, thinking about what can I do with a single disk, it was, to some extent, it was still a space challenge. Yeah, you could put a game on it. Yeah, you could put some documents on it. But just how much? I don't know. I like the idea. I'm considering exploring it further. How far in are we now? 26 minutes and 27 seconds. This is probably the most fun I've had in a long time doing a Vayncast. Just talking about old MS-DOS stuff. Different things you could do with the disk. Hey, this would be a good time to get out my old QBasic manual and maybe write some custom QBasic programs. What would they do? I don't know. Maybe I could just write a little launcher program that would prompt the user. Thanks for picking up the disk. This was created by CF from Tiger Claw Radio. You can listen to me on Tiger Claw TV on YouTube or TigerClawTV.com. This disc contains XYZ games. It was designed to be distributed at MagFest. In order to load the launcher program, hit Y, and then accept input from the user. Then after that, to exit this, and explore the thing, hit this button. Yeah, I could do something like that in QBasic, and it wouldn't be too difficult. All right, how are we doing now? And with that, boys and girls, I'm still a few blocks away from the office, but I'm going to go ahead and pull the plug, send you guys back to the studio. Thanks for letting me ramble about MS-DOS games. This is legitimately going to make my Thursday at work a lot better. I'll see you back in the studio.
Back in the studios again. I was not yet able to dig up the zip file from the original pinball construction set video that I did at the very beginning of my channel back in 2008, but I did find an old implementation of DOSBox that I have on a flash drive, right? So I got a hold of, at one point, I think this might have even been as recently as like last year. I got a hold of a little thumb drive, very small thumb drive, that ran about 16 gigs on it, and I just started putting stuff on it, portable installs of programs that I would use occasionally, like GIMP and some emulators. I put some chiptune creation software on it. FamaTracker is very small, very, very small. And I put an implementation of DOSBox.
and a big folder full of games. So in that folder full of games, I found Pinball Construction Set, but an even older implementation. And that version of Pinball Construction Set, it had 2 pinball tables that I built myself, and the files were dated 2011. So 9 years old these files are. Not as old as, say, 2008 when that video was originally made, but pretty old. They're pretty simplistic, but they were something. So I do have old PCS work still around. And I got it out and I went right to work, man. It was a lot of fun. A lot of fun indeed. So with that, it's time for the fail bag, boys and girls. It's just you here. It's just me here. It's an empty shop, you know. The bar is starting to close. I got my cup of coffee. The Sam Malone is wiping down the counters, getting ready to close up. Let's enjoy the fact that it's just us. Whatever you got to say to me, let's have it. You can send it. You can put it on YouTube in a comment, and I'll read it. Or if you know me personally, shoot me an email. Let me know. Just do me a favor and be real clear about what I am and am not supposed to read on the air. That way, there's no confusion. So we got one from Hemrock, who wrote me an email, and I love these emails. And he writes, "Hey, Paisan, thanks as usual for another episode. I enjoyed your discussion about making an NES cart. I'd be interested in picking up a Green Leo album in cartridge form. Maybe you could make a best of album and slap that on a few Nintendo tapes. Before you know it, I'll be going full-on retro hipster, listening to chiptunes on my NES toaster, while playing an FM Towns Marty and sipping vintage Crystal Pepsi." All right, we're going to take a break from this email, and we're going to respond to a couple things in there. First things first, Crystal Pepsi's coming back, brother. You know this? They've been teasing it in the media. Crystal Pepsi is a real thing that's going to happen. Now let's talk about making an NES cart album. So here's the deal. So NES cartridges had a very limited number of channels that you could do. There was one that was often used for bass. It was like a simple square wave kind of excuse me, jeez. Simple triangle wave that could only really do bass. Then there were 2 square wave ones which would do most of the melodies. So you could do a 2-track melody. Then there was a 4th one that was a noise channel, oftentimes used for drums. And then there was a 5th one that was used for samples. Now the samples took up a lot of space, so in most NES games they weren't utilized, but those 5 channels made up the layout of NES sound as we know it. So the problem with putting a best of on a Nintendo game is that other manufacturers had special individualized expansion chips directly on the board of the game, which expanded this. Okay, one such chip from Nintendo late in their catalog enabled 2 additional square waves. So you would have a 4-track harmony in addition to bass and drums and samples instead of just 2. That's a huge upgrade. And then Konami had its own chip that had its own unique sound. And when I made the later the later Green Leo albums, I would bounce around from expansion chip to expansion chip, because if you're making a track in Famitracker, you can just use whatever and it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. You're just producing an MP3, so who cares if you have 10 different songs and they're all using different expansion chips? So, but the problem is, I'd have to be very careful. It would be limiting in terms of what could go with what on what Nintendo cartridge. I would, however, point out that I'm pretty sure I do have all the old .nsf files for those old tracks. I got them somewhere. I held on to them. Usually when I say I got it somewhere, that means it's on an external hard drive. We have a bright orange external hard drive with all of our long-term data, and my wife has it right now because she likes messing around with photos. She's really good at that. She goes to Shutterfly. She'll upload some photos, and she'll make like a nice mug. I've got a mug that says World's Best Dad on it, and it has pictures of my kids and stuff. My mouse pad right now has got pictures of my family on it. She does all that kind of stuff. So she has the hard drive. So I got to go get it if I want to dig up some of that old data. What else did you mention? Yeah, but there's other ways to do it. If I were to make my own NES cart, I would do it by buying. I wouldn't do it using donor cartridges. We don't need to do that anymore. That was a viable way to make reproduction cartridges at the beginning when reproduction cartridges first were coming in vogue. Now there's a company that makes all new boards. And they're not expensive either. You can get all new 100% original boards. So you can make a reproduction cartridge without destroying a single old cartridge. Because let me tell you, these reproduction cartridges are so they're so widespread now that the cartridges being used for donor cartridges that you would think are easily accessible, eventually they're not going to be as cheap anymore, you know? But anyway, I'm going off on a tangent. Let's get back to the email. He says, you mentioned streaming Jill of the Jungle. That'd be cool. I know you've done it before. Ever thought about returning to reviewing games like the old days? Yes, I have. I think you could probably throw together a good review of Jill of the Jungle quickly, considering you've got a ton of footage. Anyways, just a thought. Actually, that's a really good idea. I know you probably know this, but maybe not all of your listeners. You can pick up all 3 episodes of Jill of the Jungle free on GOG.com. You know, I had forgotten that it was free. I couldn't remember if it was free or if I bought it in a sale. I just knew I had it in my collection. But yeah, if you guys have never played Jill of the Jungle and you don't want to mess with DOSBox or anything like that, or abandonware, go over to GOG. You can get it on the level completely free. It's legit and it's awesome. It's a great game. Jill of the Jungle. Alright, he goes on. Sorry to hear about that your pinball boards from Pinball Construction Set are not readily available. But hey, it would be awesome if you made some new ones. Amen. You spoke of the 5 1/4 inch floppies. Yeah, I remember those. They were truly floppy disks. Are you sure those disks back in your mom's house are corrupted? A couple of years ago, I got a hold of some of my dad's 3.5 inch floppies, and to my surprise, most of the data was still intact. But I do believe 3.5 inch floppies are more durable than 5 1/4 ones. So I'm not sure, but it may be worth checking out if you have the chance. I don't know, but if I ever manage to get those out of my mother's house, I will find a way to find out. You get what I'm saying? I will make this happen. I have the feeling they're not going to work, but I can't get them out of my mother's house to try right now. Let's see what else he's got to say. He says, yes, the arcade volleyball game I mentioned is the one with the guys with the little weird heads. However, the version I remember playing is with 2 semicircles, which I think about was a Flash game I played a long time ago. Similar concept, though. I've recently reorganized my backup hard drive and found some RPG Maker games on it, including your old Colteca demo. Did you ever get into playing RPG Maker games? Keep rolling retro, Hemrock. Wow, what a great email. What a great email. Let's see. Oh yeah, and let's see his picture that he attached. Let's open this up. Frustration. No matter how many times you try, you can't shoot the dog. You know, I've seen that one before, but man, is it awesome. Let's talk about this thing, by the way. The image from last week's episode became the thumbnail. And thank you for doing that for me, because making the thumbnail is my least favorite part of producing a podcast. I appreciate that. I should use this one as well. I don't know. I might go with something MS-DOS based, because this is being recorded right now on February the 14th. It is Valentine's Day. So this should be a Valentine's MS-DOS themed program. But let's answer some of your questions. So, have I ever got into playing RPG Maker games? My favorite RPG Maker games to play are when someone else I know is making them, and I make one as well, and we trade. I've done this a couple of times. I did it with Engie, who you and I went to MagFest with a couple of years back. He and I did it many times over the years. Many times. And then I played... Sean made a an RPG Maker project. I can't remember what it's called, like Age of Chaos or something. And then Kaiser made some strange mini games. I have played other highly rated RPG Maker games from other people, but it's much more of a rare occurrence. There was a game called Storm of Spears, which was a commercially released RPG Maker game that I actually bought and got a hold of, and I did a review of it recently on Emerald Rangers. So it's called Storm of Spears. So that's available to read if you so desire. Yeah, I like RPG Maker games. You find a lot of the same things in RPG Maker games, but they're good fun. They're good vanilla, chill out kind of fun. And that's it for that email. Hemrock, brother, it's good to hear from you, man. I hope your life is going well. And I hope you're enjoying the party. Let's head over to YouTube and see what we got. I know we've got, last week was a widely commented episode. All right, here we go. Oh yeah, that's right. I put up a bunch of videos this week. Returning the C64 Mini. Talked a little bit about the XFL. And then I did a Eurorack jam, which sounded terrible, but was a lot of fun to do. So let's see what we got. Bear with me, it's loading. Yeah, here we go. What's on my shelf? Good old Mecha Menace kicks us off 4 days ago. He says, a caveat about desoldering and soldering ROM chips to the cartridge boards many times. The pads, the little silver circles that surround the holes which the legs of the ROM chip thread through. Those pads can flake off after a few times of soldering and desoldering. Some boards are better than others. You would be better looking for a socket solution. Basically, you solder a socket into those pinholes and then pop a new ROM in every time you want to change the game on the cart. All right, quick break from the comment. I'm familiar with sockets. This is from synthesizer work. There's a lot of integrated circuits in synthesizers, and I've been studying how to, how to not design synthesizer parts, but how to reproduce them from schematics onto a breadboard and then solder them onto strip board that way. So I see most people use sockets whenever they have an integrated circuit or like a chip of some kind. It tends to be a socket. So yeah, I'm familiar with a little bit with how those work. That is an excellent idea. Give me a second, I can blow my nose. All right. Wait, I accidentally minimized it without thinking. All right, yeah, here we go. Let's get back to the email. He says, so there's no Symphony of the Night, X, or Rondo because Konami knows they can sell them separately and people will buy them. People who wouldn't buy the other Castlevanias because of their rep and physical price, those people would buy a digital Rondo or a Symphony of the Night separately. Yes, I understand that. It still sucks, though. But he goes on. It makes sense that your Hadasan comes from a PS1 game. It's the same era as that Japanese exclusive N64 game I linked. Besides the Taito logo I threw in last week's comment, here's another favorite of mine. And now I got it rigged up so I can play this and you'll actually hear it. Let's see what he's got. I hope it's not too loud. It's loading right now. Bear with me. Chameleon Twist 2 from an N64 long play. What does this sound like? It sounds like that. That is good. I like that. Let's do that one more time. There it is. Sunsoft. It's a Sunsoft game. I don't know, man. My Hadasan is a little bit difficult to beat. A little bit difficult to beat. Can we get... Can we get an actual By Hadasan? There's got to be a By Hadasan video. I don't know. I'll look it up at a later date. Very cool. It comes from a Sunsoft published Japan Supply System developed Chameleon Twist games. I prefer the slight modification to the logo in the Chameleon Twist 2, But those two are probably the last thing worthwhile coming out of Sunsoft, which I can remember. Remind me if there was anything later published or developed by Sunsoft that stands out. Kool-Aid, he finishes off by saying, Kool-Aid Magic the Gathering card is legit. I agree. We can thank Hemrock for that one. I really don't know much Sunsoft came out with, except I think Sunsoft is responsible for the NES version of Spy Hunter, which I loved. I loved that game, but that is a well-known fact here on Tiger Club Radio. Mecha Menace, good to hear from you, brother. Hope your life is good. Hope your family's well. And I hope you're enjoying the party. Death Adder writes, over 10,000 hours in 143 countries across 5 different continents. This may be the best Tiger Claw artwork of all time. Oh, yeah! I'd like to get your input on some recent YouTube drama. It involves YouTube legend Sinister Moon calling out this guy who straight up looks like Al Borland from Tool Time. John Hancock. Apparently he's been conning rubies out of their gamers and rubies out of he's been conning rubes out of their games and money, saying he's opening up some video game museum. You know what? I know that guy. I don't know. Let me change how I'm phrasing this. I know who you're talking about. That guy to me was like, I looked at his channel. I did this thing where it's like I heard his name and somebody was talking about him, so I checked him out and I looked at the channel and it was like 30 seconds and I was out. Saw the channel, saw the dude, saw his layout, went into the first video, clicked around, kind of saw his format, and I was like, all right, you know what? God bless, not for me. Nothing personal. It's just people do that to me all the time. And you know what? I completely understand. If you've clicked into my channel and you've looked at my layout and you click into a video and you look and you see a few seconds and you're like, you know what? Not for me. I'm okay with that because at that point, you've given it an honest shot. Not a big shot. Not like, not I'm going to sit here and watch an entire video. No. But you gave it a shot. I gave this guy a shot and it wasn't for me. So now there's like drama surrounding him or whatever. He's talking about my video game museum, whatever. First of all, video game museum to me doesn't really sound that interesting. I'm so sorry. I'm sorry. I know I'm alone on that. Unless it's being run by Gamester81, then I don't care. Because if Gamester opens a museum, I'm in. Then it's a different story altogether. Because a lot of tech channels, including this Marquez Brownlee guy, however you say his name, when they refer to an old obscure video game console, they steal footage from Gamester81 to show it off. I see that happen all the time. Gamester81 has got to be the most stolen from YouTuber I've ever seen. Ever. Bar none. I'm not saying he's the most the most ever, but the most ever that I've seen. So yeah, I don't really have any dog in the fight in terms of the drama. I've been watching Top Loaded Gaming. He's been keeping up with it, so I'm kind of getting the secondhand info on what's going on. But what are you going to do? A bunch of people being silly. Good to hear from you, Death Adder. I hope your life is going good, brother. Gaming Beast 82 writes, making an album on the NES cartridge? Now that is really cool. Reminds me of the C64 Amiga demo disc / cassette. There might have even been a Spectrum C64 cassette album / video game out there. Not sure though. I played through Ikari Warriors 3 on stream recently. It was interesting, but honestly it was a bit long for an arcade experience. It took me a while to notice that you can turn your character. Well, Mike Matai can suck a cornucopia of dongs. The more I hear / read about him, the more I dislike him. I was playing Ultima 2 while listening to the podcast. Has some crazy lore, but it hasn't aged well. Still played it through with a little cheating, and I don't regret that I did. I mean, if you travel to time, you can, including to 1990 New San Antonio, and fly to space eventually. It seems like early games Richard Garriott wanted more of a cross-genre game, and still had fun making them. I remember that we owned Castlevania 2 and 3, with 3 being our favorite, since you could play Simon Alucard and that weird wall-climbing pirate. It was still hard as nails, though. Symphony of the Night was really neat. I think you'll enjoy it. Either way, with the Power of the Kool-Aid Man card, our deck will be invincible. Oh, yeah! Everybody's showing love to Hemrock's Kool-Aid Man card. It was very well done, Hemrock. So I got to play Castlevania 2 courtesy of Sendu, who sent me that cartridge years ago. It's not a bad game. Not a bad game. Not a bad game. It's well known that James Rolfe didn't give it a fair shake that first time around. Well known fact. Even he said it himself. Not a bad game at all. Sean, I hope your life's good, man. Good to hear from you. Desm 101 finishes up the fail bag for the week. And he puts a couple time signatures. First of all, let me just say, I appreciate it when people put time signatures. I think it's a very helpful thing. If you want to follow up on what somebody says or something, hey, yeah, here, this is exactly what I'm talking about, guys. Click on this and you can check it out. Such a simple little touch, but it's really nice. So thanks for that. 1 hour and 4 minutes in, he says, yes, FM Towns is mostly known for its impressive ports. There are some nice versions of point-and-click games like Zack McCracken, Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, and Loom. Splatterhouse is a good one as well. As well as the ports of Chase HQ, Raiden, Street Fighter 2. Lastly, there's some other good unique stuff like Ray Bander, and Mad Stalker. 1 hour and 5 minutes in. I did put up a new live set about a month ago. It's Vaporwave. You can see it on my DJ playlist on my channel. It's the newest one called Late Night Video Store. But I have another one in the works now for some house and techno, about to drop on my Mixcloud in a week or two. Things are going good here. Hope things are going good for you too, brother. Great episode. Dazzle, man. So glad things are going well. By the way, when your new one comes out, make sure you pop in and let us know. Let us know. Because I am subscribed to you on YouTube. But, you know what? Why don't we go ring that bell? I don't think I have that bell rang. Yeah, I'm subbed. Look at this. You upload once in a while. Look at this, but not too much. 3 days ago, 1 week ago, 4 weeks ago, 1 month ago, 2 months ago. It's every once in a while. Yeah, we'll ring that bell. Oh, geez. Now I have to know what this means. Personalized? You get personalized notifications. I hope that means I'm going to get notifications. I'll check it out. I will check it out. Oh, can I subscribe to your mix list? I want to be subbed, and I want to get a notice when your mix list gets updated. Oh, well. I got the bell on. That should do it. I should get... Whoop. That's right. When I have it set up this way, you'll hear it when the Steam thing goes off. That's the Resident Evil multiplayer group. Somebody's asking for something. Team Slayer, 3 out of 4 people only to make achievement for Resident Evil 5. Oh, and he's online. Yeah, buddy. Another time. I'm talking to my boys right now. Yeah, if you guys haven't yet, head over to Desm's channel. Check out his stuff. This is a cool channel, man. We got some... What is this? I'm looking at your popular uploads right now. WRC4. There we go. Virtual racing on the Saturn. People love the Saturn, man. It's weird because people love the Saturn so much, but then like when you don't have to travel far to get to people who have like don't know it, never heard of it. You know, the Saturn is a weird beast, man. It really is. But amongst us gentlemen listening to this, or ladies if you're out there, we know what the Saturn is, right? It's unthinkable to not at least know what that name is, the Sega Saturn. However much experience you would do or don't have with it. Oh, come on now. Come on now, you gotta stop. I know you want to play Team Slayer, only to make an achievement. Yeah, however much you have or haven't played with, we all know what the Saturn is. It is unmistakably part of history. You got 3DO stuff? I gotta spend more time on your channel, dude. Alright, we're gonna pin this. Pin that tab. Pin that tab, boys and girls. Alright. I think that's it. Did I actually read your whole comment? Yes, I did. Yes, I did. Desm, brother, hope your life is going good, man. And with that, boys and girls, I think we're wrapping up for the day. I forgot I have my audio set up differently, so I have to do this manually in real time now. Here we go. Hang on, bear with me. Hey, there it is. I love that. It never gets old. You guys play Maniac Mansion? That was Michael's track. You know what I love about this was I put this recording together when I was still gathering assets for Tiger Claw Radio like 10 years ago. And if you go back to the beginning of this, you can hear where I clicked. I was recording in real time off of my computer, and you can hear where I clicked the play button. Listen, I'm going to put it back so you can listen. That's play. I think it was the Windows Media Player at the time. All right, it's time for encouragement. Whatever it is you guys are doing in your lives, whatever struggles that I know you're going back to, don't let your struggles depress you, okay? Embrace them. Because the struggles that we can overcome, we can use to measure our strength and our accomplishments. Because the things that are worthwhile in life usually come with struggles. So don't let them get you down. If you got a lot of struggles, then you must have something good waiting on the other side. So you know what we got to do? We got to man up, and we got to smash through them. Like the Kool-Aid Man! Oh yeah! I'll see you next week. Let's just let Michael's theme play just a little bit. Oh yeah. See you next week.